So, can the path of renunciation help address anxiety? And in this case, when I'm talking about anxiety, I'm talking about what for me manifests as kind of the first moment of waking on some, but not all, many, but not most, but many mornings as I achieve consciousness, as I leave dream state, as I become aware that I'm awake. The sensation, the phenomena, the emotion that is with me in those moments is anxiety. It is a negative anticipation for the schedule of the day, whatever that might be. It's usually associated with things I know I need to do at work, but can often just be when there's any kind of clearly committed time schedule. I waken, that makes me anxious. For me, that anxiety feels like a low-level buzz in my mind that is filled with content associated with specific things that I'm worried about, filled with the desire to simply be at the end of the day, to have already done all of that. There's a part of me that knows that I'm just going to go ahead and do all of this, but the sensation is not pleasant, and I try to avoid it by staying in bed, perhaps trying to go back to sleep, perhaps just not getting up. So that's not a great way to deal with it. It actually makes things worse, right? It gives space for the anxiety to cycle. I do think that we live in a society that cultivates this level of anxiety. I think our economic condition, even, I have a good job that's stable. I've worked the same job for 20 years. But a couple times a year, I'm still wondering if I'm going to get laid off. It's not good, is it? But it's a deliberate maneuver. And we're all, regardless of our jobs, there's probably very few of us who are absolutely confident in our economic well-being. And so then any worry about work automatically becomes a little bit existential. It's not great, but I think it's a deliberate part of the system. And on top of that, we have social media, which is more and more I'm aware that it really is true that social media is a profound negative for our society. It plays on our deepest desires for connection and for to be seen and to see, to hear, to be heard, to have context. And do you know what I mean? Like, it starts off allowing people to connect with communities that they would otherwise not be able to connect with. And that is a positive. But social media, the algorithm around it, is no longer, if it ever was, it is no longer useful to drive you towards like-minded people who might be able to support you through difficult times that they may have done, or to share ideas that would otherwise be hard to come across. That can all still happen. But the social media algorithm, and I think maybe I'm including our media in general right now, has just become very, very very negative, and I don't see a way out of that. But so that's anxious, all right? That's anxiety producing. So what to do in that that confluence of anxieties? And again, remember, I haven't yet gotten out of bed. Well, one of the teachings is to start each day, the very first thing, with a positive aspiration, whether that's guru yoga, whether it's metta, compassion. Have that be the first thing that you bring to mind. So why is that? Well, one of the things that happens then is if I'm lying there in bed spiraling, spinning with anxiety about tasks that need to be done and the general cataclysm of Facebook and all of the negative influences that both of those things have on our nervous systems. I do think it's a substance in the air, like an ether, that approaches us as if we were being surrounded by electricity. So how about a thought of compassion? May all sentient beings be happy. May all sentient beings be free from suffering. So if I think that, now there's a space created that's not the anxiety. And this, I think, is a useful way of thinking about renunciation, because I think it's easy to hear the word renunciation and think it means, or interpret it to mean, that somehow I can renounce anxiety, because anxiety is at its core an unwholesome state based on attachment to some other state, ignorance of the true state, anger, any of the poisonous, unwholesome emotions that can generate anxiety. And so to renounce them is to shift them away. But I don't know how to do that, right? I don't know how to just push something away. I think there's two strategies that come to mind. One is, if we reside in a comprehension of the true nature of self, then what is there to be anxious about? If we recognize ourself as impermanent, continually changing pattern of energy, of elements, of capabilities, desires, everything flowing through, and at any given moment, simply a combination of those phenomena and the momentary consciousness of those phenomena. Well, in that case, the content is secondary, and the process is what's definitive. Well, okay, so that is the mind state of an awakened being. But although I may be awake in bed, I'm not an awakened being. I'm a practitioner, I'm a student, and I am aspirational. So what can I do, given that I'm not a bodhisattva? Given that I am a student of the nature of mind and a practitioner, what does the conscious generation of compassion, what does that do? So it shifts the anxiety a little bit. It doesn't push it away, but it replaces it. And it replaces it in a broader context. So think of renunciation I say to myself, and I'm saying to you, think of renunciation as repositioning. That the anxiety, and I was making a big deal out of it being caused by social media and by work, but it could be it could be existential anxiety, it could be anything. Renunciation, I don't think today, with my current understanding, renunciation doesn't mean that it goes away. It means that the position from which I am aware of a particular phenomenon has grown, has expanded. And the moment that I start to consider metta, compassion, first thing in the morning, is a renunciation of anxiety by positioning it differently. I haven't transformed the anxiety. This isn't Tantra. I'm not transforming the anxiety into compassion. And neither am I simply letting the anxiety be, because first thing in the morning, I'm still kind of grasping on the fundamentals of what I think of the mistaken idea of the self. But focusing on the compassion first thing shifts that off to the side. Is that making sense? I know I'm blurring some lines there as well, because you could say that what I'm really describing is, in fact, simply letting the anxiety be what it is, or transforming the anxiety into compassion. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like I wake, and I wake with more of my animal brain, which is very much grasping on a sense of permanent self and all of the anxiety that comes along with that, because it's a permanent self that has to get ready for some important meetings, or is probably going to be criticized for some mistakes at work, or, like I said, may be worried that I'm going to get laid off the next 6 months, or that I'm not writing music often enough or well enough, or that I'm not, fill in the blank. You probably have a list of things as well that on any given day are really important goals and objectives that probably won't get met. That disappointment and that anxiety can change, can evaporate, can transform. But what I find most helpful is just the idea of shifting it a little bit, shifting it off to the side a little bit by bringing up something else. And then relying on my routine. Because if it was up to my sense of will, if it was up to willpower, I wouldn't do anything, because I've lost my will at that moment. But if I know that I'm going to get up, I'm going to do 20 minutes of easy stretching, I'm going to deal with the pets, I'm going to make some coffee, I'm going to come up, I'm going to do my meditation practice. All of that comes from that moment, initial seed that just shifts, right? And say, from that seed, I'm going to take these actions. And I don't need to think about them. I don't need to question them. I know what they are, so I don't need a decision to be made. I just need to move through them. And then when those are all done, it's not a question of feeling better. It's a question of having settled into a different state of mind. A state of mind that is changeable, fluid, impermanent, but a more wholesome state of mind, one that allows me to then consider the different practices around nature of mind. It's like the practice is a balm of some kind. a salve. Was it, what do you put on your skin when you have poison ivy? Calamine lotion, is that what it is? Some sort of chalky substance, something that you put on your skin that just soothes it. It hasn't gotten rid of the underlying condition, but it has soothed it. I mean, like aloe on burnt skin. And from that soothed position, which is partly the first step of concentrated mind, that's a condition that is conducive to meditation and to compassion and to authentic action. Because those anxious elements have been situated differently. And maybe they have transformed somehow, right? Like my anxiety about work is really a desire to do it well. Yeah, a fear that I'll do it badly. But it's potentially a source of motivation and energy if it's in the context of this broader sort of salvific, graceful, authentic way of being. So, my friends, that is what I think of when I think of renunciation. I don't think of it as punitive or denial. I think of it as focusing to create space on a wholesome condition. What do you think? Does that make sense? Questions, comments, put them in the video chat. Drop me a note. Otherwise, it's a Thursday today, so keep your wits about you for the rest of the work week.